If you missed out on our previous webinars, we have them recorded and available, and there's a slide available to show you how you can access those. And if you need some help with that, please reach out to us later on. If you've been paying any attention lately, cyber attacks have really been up. Cyber attackers have really been upping their attack vector in the last little bit. And all the cyber experts are only expecting it to get a lot worse. We've heard of JBL Meats paying an $11 million recovery cost, and the East Coast Pipeline provider, which was also in the news. Many people in the small business market consider their small enterprise or small business not to be a target, but it's simply not the case. We're all targets, whether we want to admit it or not. As many of you on the webinar have our existing stack of security products in use, we are always needing to adjust our response to the challenges presented and make sure that together we do as much as we can to mitigate your cyber risk. And if you've ever had to do a cyber insurance renewal lately, you'll know that insurance providers are also requiring you to confirm the levels of security you have in place. But that's a discussion for next month's webinar. We're actively adding some additional pieces to our security stack, including dark site monitoring, vulnerability scanning, and managed threat detection and response, which is the topic of today's webinar. The agenda for today is going to be about a 20-minute presentation by our partners at Sophos. There'll be an opportunity for some Q&A and a prize draw at the end. So we'll encourage you, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll do our best to address your questions near the end of the time here. So Taylor, I'm going to pass this over to you, introduce our speaker, the topic for today, and we'll go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Next month, we are going to be talking about navigating cyber insurance. That is something that we get a lot of questions about. A lot of people get forms to fill out for cyber insurance, or they might want to know more about it, if they need it, etc. How do they qualify? How do they keep the rates low? So we've asked an insurance company to join us to talk a little bit more about that. So if that's something that's of interest, please join us next month. And I'd like to introduce Rippy, who's been our technical lead at Sophos for the last few years. And he's got a great presentation lined up for you. We do have a prize draw as well that's coming up, which we'll announce at the end of the call. Rippy, go ahead.
Afternoon, everybody. So as Steve mentioned, I mean, he's reacting to the threat landscape and how it's changing and adding better tools to it. And the main focus is managed threat responses. But not only the solution, what I want to do is I have a great benefit because of the threat landscape, understanding what it is, because currently today I'm a sales engineering manager for Canada with Sophos, but I've been with the organization for the past 10 years. And that really means I've grown up in the security space, right? My career has progressed from Sophos from being a frontline endpoint support engineer to a firewall support engineer, understanding the challenges customers face from there. But it also let me see the evolution of threat landscape, how it's changing, how it's grown, and also how we as cybersecurity organizations ourselves have had to grow and adapt to keep up with the challenge of keeping organizations safe, right? And we don't do this on our own, right? We do this by partnering with organizations that understand the need for evolution, change, and implementing the right solutions at the right times. And that's part and parcel of why we're here today. And this is why we partner with Steve and his team, right? And the thing is, the main purpose, once again, of this call is to go through that threat landscape, to have you understand what it's like and what the problems are and why we have to adapt and change, and why there is actually a great need to invest in modern security solutions, because relying on the traditional status quo is not enough. It's a ticking time bomb, right? Be it traditional solutions, automated solutions, or next-gen automated solutions. The thing is, those solutions are not enough to proactively protect you, because it's not a matter of if you'll be targeted by a human-led attacker that is intelligent, understands those, it's when. And the reality of this is, in order to defend against a human-led attacker, you need a human-led defense, right? And that's what our Sophos managed threat response is. And Steve wanted to speak to you, or have me speak to you on his behalf and Sophos' behalf, both that offering. And one question I know is going to come up, you're going to say, well, Steve's team is an MSP team. They're doing managed services for us. Yes, they are doing managed services. They're deploying the security solutions. They're managing those automated solutions. But there's a major gap in those automated solutions. And if you look at those two things Steve mentioned, right, those organizations were also running automated solutions. But the fact is, when they found out, they got owned here. They had a breach event, right? With that breach event, look at the loss to reputation, loss to business, but also as part and parcel, you are all aware of you're investing in cybersecurity insurance. Well, cybersecurity insurance, the costs are going up, the protection levels are going down, they're becoming more stringent, your premiums are going up. So the whole point of MTR is when we jump into the nuts and bolts of it is to not have you rely on cybersecurity insurance and the automated tools when things go wrong, but it's to make sure we have better protection much earlier in the attack game, because versus only detecting on the bad stuff when something goes wrong is not enough. You catch that bad actor, that human actor here. And that's evidence, honestly, even by the White House. And the White House recently released a letter out to businesses saying, look, we consider the threat landscape so evolved now that it's no longer an attack against data or users, individuals. It's an attack against our economy. And what they're saying is private organizations need to do their own ability to protect themselves. They need to implement EDR, which is threat hunting tools, the tools to look for that bad actor and not only rely solely on automated security. But in order to do that, they're saying you need to have the people that know those tools and can manage those tools and have the knowledge and the threat hunting expertise to chase those down. So the reality is for small organizations such as yourself or advanced organizations, large organizations, or MSPs or MSSPs or security providers, to do that 24/7, 365 effectively, it's not going to work from a human need, because those people are highly paid, they're highly in demand, and there's very few of them, especially in Canada, right? So first of all, you may get one, you may get two, but you need a large team of them. And you also need backup for covering holidays, sick time, operational coverage. But now beyond that, even when you get those people in an organization, they're going to say, well, we need extra tools. Then you got to purchase the tools, implement those tools. So by the time you invest in all of that, it's a massive outlay. It doesn't make business sense. It makes more sense to partner with an organization that you already have deployed within your infrastructure and leverage their tools, but also use their knowledge and use that centralized security operations center we provide with our MTR. So we're augmenting your protection teams. We're augmenting Steve's teams to backstop them and to be able to offer this MTR service. Now, before we even get into the product, a lot of you are familiar, obviously, with Steve's team and you work with them directly, but you may not be familiar with Sophos, right? So just to let you know who we are and the organization I represent. Sophos is a 35-year-old organization, over 35 years old, right? And we have over 420,000 customers worldwide. Now, beyond that, we have over 2,900 MTR customers. So as an organization, not only are we a cybersecurity manufacturer, but outside of the tools we create, the endpoints you're running, the intercept you're running, the firewalls you're running, those are the automated tools. But behind those automated tools, outside of even security operations analysts, we have our Sophos labs. These are our threat researchers that understand the threats out there, see the threat feeds, and help us build better protections and deep protections into the tools, such as our machine learning, augmenting that so we're better at protecting against the unseen malware, right? Or the unseen or more advanced attacks. But once again, those are all focusing on that breach event or the bad stuff, and they're focusing on the uh-oh moment, but they're not focusing on, is somebody inside my environment? Is somebody lurking inside my environment? And the reality is, if I'm in there, I'm going to be in there for 3 weeks on average, up to 200 days. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look and understand you're running backups. Then I'm going to understand what your backup mechanisms are. I'm going to understand where your servers are, where your crown jewels are. Once I've done enough recon, then I will drop the payload and attack. And that's where, at that point, it's too late. I'm already been inside the organization. Even if you stop the attack, how do you know I'm not there? Or have I progressed from your organization into partner organization? So it becomes the event of, well, this can cripple a business. It can destroy a business's reputation, because a responsible business owner is going to protect themselves, but if they have business relationships and with other vendors and customers, you have to be be open about it, be transparent, and do your due diligence. And for this reason, you see that 2,100 plus MTR customers. This is strongly becoming an issue that organizations are wanting to address. And the way they're addressing it is how we've evolved, augmenting the tools of threat research labs with a security operations center. So that means taking those tools and augmenting the people, our threat hunters, our threat responders, or threat researchers, or incident responders, those people that are going to be monitoring your environment 24/7, 365, and helping catch it here as the ingress of an attack versus you relying on automated tools and having to rely on insurance premiums, trying to do all the reporting and have a business crippling or business ending event, right? So that's kind of one of the main reasons Steve, as a business owner himself, wanted to portray this information to you, because people he does business on a daily basis. His team is leveraging this tool, and they also want to make sure that you're going to be leveraging this tool and you understand the true need for this added investment, right? And when we look at this, I mean, part and parcel of this, not just who we are, right? The other part is we want to discuss the threat landscape. And when I show you the threat landscape, I've been with Sophos for 10 years, and we've seen a dramatic change in the threat landscape. But we have not seen it as dramatic as we have in the last year, because attackers are event-driven. And what event has happened? COVID, right? So COVID has made it much harder because of all the different changes in the way we live, the way we do business, the way we communicate, and the way we operate, right? So therefore, we're relying on technology much more. We're relying on electronic information exchange much more. We're not doing as much face-to-face. So it's completely evolved the way we do business. It's taken our attention away from maybe some core competencies, things we would be aware of, but we're more distracted. The attackers know that, so they leverage that because that gives them more attack vectors, more attack targets, and they're hoping for a higher hit rate, right? Because we as defenders have to be right every single time. They as attackers only have to be right once, and they're inside your organization. So before we even get into like what has happened and how COVID has changed that, let's look at kind of the pre-COVID threat landscape, right? So when we look at pre-COVID, I call this my scare education slide, right? It's not as meant as much to scare you as it is to educate you. So this, once again, that threat research center, our labs that protects the back end of our products, they're the ones that provide this data, right? And this came from them. So this is just our labs. Our labs individually, when we're talking about threat vectors here, we're talking about email and web, right? You use the web every day for business operations, for personal use, reading the news, checking the weather, etc. Social media, anything you're using the web, it's become inherently part of our life. So you can't stop using it, right? The other part is email. Email is how businesses communicate, how you do business, how we do business, right? And the thing is that you can't shut down, but there's a major threat vector there from spam. But when we look at, for example, URLs, we're seeing over 150,000 suspicious URLs. Okay, so there's that many, but of those, there's 30,000 malicious URLs. And these are the URLs that are the honeypots, where they're meant to get you to pull down payloads such as Trojans or other tools so an attacker can get into your environment. Or they're meant to steal your credentials, maybe fake you out thinking you're clicking on a link that, oh, you need 2FA, sign it Office 365, you're federated sign, etc., trying to get you to give away your credentials, right? Those are things then the attacker will use to leverage against you, right? Or get inside your environment and be able to do all the recon. The thing is, of those 30,000 malicious URLs, they're not from the porn.coms, the drug.coms, and the outersite.coms. 80% of them are from legitimate sites. And attackers are smart. The way they're getting into these sites is through malvertising, right? Through banner ads, or they may be compromising the sites themselves. And when we're talking about the evolution of threat, before it was just spray and pray, you click, but now they know, hey, you know what? I'm on this site. I have this malvertising. The advertising's work. I'm seeing click metrics, right? What I'll do is I'll weaponize this on Friday night. And I'll leave this link weaponized until Sunday at 12 a.m. And what this does is, if somebody clicks and calls in, the site admin's not there, email the site admin, whatever. By the time the site admin gets in on Monday to look at this, they're going to say, oh, there's nothing there. You know what? Maybe it's a blip. Or maybe that link you click on, most of the time, or that component of the site is always clean. But every 10th click, because you're getting millions of clicks over time, every 10th click is enough for me to get an attack volume. Every 10th click will be weaponized. So once again, they're hiding in plain sight, but they're doing it in a way to try to avoid detection, because then they get longer dwell time in that environment to have a higher chance to hit environments such as yours. Now, outside of even that, right, once again, you also have how much malware we're seeing, right? We're seeing over 400,000 new pieces of malware a day. But beyond that new malware, as we talk and we discuss, usually traditional security tools said, we see something, it's fine. But then if it does something bad, then we put it on a no-fly list. So for example, if with traditional tools, something hasn't been seen doing something bad, just like you go to the airport, you're not on a no-fly list because you haven't done anything bad to get on. So if that is bad, it's still allowed to run until somebody identifies it. So therefore, what they were doing is, if that's the method of catching, what really their way around that was not to keep reusing that same code. And that the one key stat to pay attention to on this page is, of that massive amount of malware, only 75% is seen once by our labs. So they're changing the code a little bit, tweaking things so they can get by that traditional automated security. Now, next gen security you're running through Steve's team, what they've deployed with Sophos, Intercept X, is smarter. It has machine learning, all these other tools to be able to detect the unseen malware, to be able to detect behavioral analytics, to be able to see other pieces that the attacker is going to leverage. But I mean, this is the bad stuff, right? The threat vectors, the threat attack vectors. And I mean, some things you can't avoid. You can't avoid going to the websites you do. You can't avoid going to the news, weather, etc. Right? These are things you do, or they're business sites. You can't avoid going to them. So therefore, there are those threat vectors you cannot completely get away from. Right? You can't just shut yourself off. But I mean, and that kind of leads into this next slide. So this next slide talks about software vulnerabilities. So for you, those of you that don't know what software vulnerability is, essentially when a developer develops code, they develop code for functional practice. They may have some security practice. They may do some testing. But what happens is the attackers know you're running Adobe. They know you're running Microsoft. They know you're running PowerPoint. They know you're running other tools. So what they'll do is they will look at those tools and try to identify holes in that software, security holes in that software that allows them into your environment. Those are easy targets to get into environments, right? And we always say, patch early, patch often. So Microsoft, whenever you see that little pop-up says, hey, patch Adobe, you know what? You usually ignore it. I'm doing some work. I'll get to it later. Or I'll defer that reboot, etc. What you're doing is that vendor has had somebody report that vulnerability. Hopefully a good hat, right? A white hat. Or maybe they saw that vulnerability get leveraged in the wild. Well, now they know they have the vulnerability. They need to patch it so you're protected against it, right? We always say patch early, patch often. Now, on average, when you don't have nobody monitoring or watching this, these holes are open for 90 days. And the reporting of these is kind of a double-edged sword. One is, let all the good guys know they need to patch. But also, if you're taking 90 days, you're also letting the bad guys know that these vulnerabilities exist. And you know what? Well, for 90 days, I have a chance to take advantage of it. I mean, in some of our threat research slides, there's a Microsoft Word vulnerability from 2017 that still exists in some organizations out there that attackers are leveraging to get inside an organization. Now, the good thing is, Taylor and I was talking about this as we prep for this presentation, and I asked Taylor, I go, what's your practice? 30 days? That's what I usually hear. But Taylor and his team are much more proactive. They're doing bi-weekly patching. So you're not as vulnerable to that. But the scary thing is, these vulnerabilities, initially they were very small, right? There's very few of them. But as the reward got larger for the attackers, you started getting more and more vulnerabilities being exposed and leveraged and used. And if you look over the last few years, look how high that number is, right? We're anticipating 17,800 different vulnerabilities. And this is in some obscure software. This is in software you use every day to do your business. Be it your ERP software, be it Adobe, be it Word, be it Microsoft Windows itself. For example, if you guys look at Microsoft Exchange, the Hafnium attack, be it SolarWinds, tools that IT organization use, which you may not have seen as an end user or business owner. But the everyday tools you use, even on your phone. Why am I doing an update only get 3 or 4 emojis? The reason that is there is behind that 3 or 4 emoji update is a massive security vulnerability or a massive operating system or security update piece that they're adding into that patch, right? So this is all the current threat landscape, all of the things you don't want or the attack vectors inside, but also how you're vulnerable from the things you use on an everyday basis, right? But what happens is when you're seeing all this, we talked about that visibility factor, right? Obviously, you're patching, you're protecting, but when we look at visibility here, this 13 hours average time to discover a threat. This is, as I talked about, this isn't the time to detect there's an attacker in here. This is on average, if malware or ransomware kicks off and somebody's encrypting all of your crown jewels, it takes on average an organization 13 hours to understand that's happening. And I mean, this may be skewed a little bit because, like I said, if I'm an attacker, I'm smart. I can read time. I'm not silly that I'm going to do it on Monday morning at 10 a.m. when everybody's in the office. I'm going to wait till Thursday evening or Friday evening or Saturday or Sunday when nobody has eyes on, right? So I got a higher chance at success. Now, a couple of this also, when we looked at the survey back from 2019, 68% of organizations said they were hit by a cyber attack. And this is from 2019. And I'm guaranteeing you these numbers are climbing, especially with the change that COVID has brought about, right? So when we look at the COVID effect, right? COVID is honestly the gift that keeps giving, right? Because as you know, you've changed the way you do business, the way you live, the way you communicate, the way you interact, the way you do a lot of everything else, right? You now have to, you're more thinking about what am I doing? You're not very security focused, or that is not top of mind. And I mean, this is that concept of event driven. This is an event that impacted everybody, and the attackers piggybacked onto this event. And this slide here really, if you take anything away from it, this slide at this graphic here highlights one thing. When there's honeypot sites, like I mentioned, all those malvertising sites, you know what? COVID came about. The attacker said, well, let's start creating sites with COVID-19 and Corona on the host names because maybe you're looking it up, and we were all aware at first. Those are honeypots dedicated to get you going there. But within that first week of February, they hit it hard. They went up to 6,000 new sites registered, right? So, and slowly there's up to 800 a day as we got later on into the year. But this very quickly, you see how they were able to expand once again their target vector for ingress or ingress or credential theft or other methods of getting you compromised, right? And the thing is, the other part and parcel of this is, you know what? We're all working from home. Most of you probably work from home. I am working from home, and a funny story working from home. I mean, my wife's a healthcare provider, and she's a nurse. Today, I'm doing this webinar. Last few days, I took time off PTO to take care of my son. Today, she unfortunately had to go on mandatory overtime. So right now, while I'm doing this webinar for you, I have a kids cam here. I'm listening to myself speak and my son playing in the other room, right? But it just speaks the analogy of if this was not COVID, I'd be in the office focused on solely doing this, right? But that analogy goes further because if I'm not focused, you as an organization or somebody monitoring organization doesn't have the visibility into, is this user, usually this user's inside this nice safe cocoon behind our corporate firewall that protects them from the bad web threats, the directed attacks, or them going to the wrong place, they're downloading the wrong things. But when that user is working from home like me, maybe somebody's working from their cabin, maybe somebody's working from a Starbucks, that threat vector opens up. Because now you don't know what sites the users are going to, you don't know what they're pulling down. And maybe I'm on, that Starbucks Wi-Fi. Somebody's compromised that Wi-Fi. There's no security of these free Wi-Fis. Somebody could now get ingress into my device. And once again, if somebody has ingress into my device and they have dwell time on my device, as part of this new threat landscape, if they enumerate, hey, Rippy works here, or Steve works here, Taylor, I've got on Taylor's device. Oh, Taylor's got some remote management software. Okay. Oh, Taylor has a VPN client on his device. Oh, this is where Taylor connects to. You know what? I'm not going to do anything because I don't want to own just Taylor's one device. I'm going to wait till Taylor connects to that VPN because Taylor now is going to attack. Well, hopefully it doesn't happen, but the reality is Taylor's going to walk me right into that organization through a trusted resource. And if I've compromised credentials, if I'm inside that organization with trusted credentials from a trusted device, at that point, there's no automated security, no alarm bells going off because I'm not dropping payload. I'm doing recon. I'm looking at all of this infrastructure, understanding where backups are going, how they're backing up, understanding all these tools. And then once I have everything, the other part and parcel is they know you have backups. If I can't compromise your backups, what I'll do is I'll slowly exfiltrate all your data. So then when I drop the bomb, it may not be of encrypting and on you from ransomware perspective. What it is it's to get your attention so you pay me. If you say, I got backups, you say, here, I'm just going to send you some of your data. Look, you may have backups. I've corrupted most of them, but also I have your billing records for the last month. Now your backup's been deemed completely inefficient, unneeded, right? So these are the things that are occurring. These are the changes that are happening. And because of this change of COVID, this is why that threat has evolved so much, right? And what does this really mean? When we talk about stats and reports, I mean, the FBI has seen a 4x increase in cybercrime. And this is attributed to all of these changes in our day-to-day, how we operate, how we secure ourselves, where we live, where we work, right? And this is not just little minor events with minor data. These are economic attacks. And you being business owners, you've worked hard, blood, sweat, and tears, and you've built these businesses. And these are not just going to be, am I going to lose some customer data? May I lose 1 or 2 customers? No. When we look at what this looks like, you can lose your entire livelihood. Your entire business can be owned, not from the fact of the attack, but also the after effects of the attack, right? Because we show you a lot of stats, right? And this is a stat that's combined from our labs as well as from a more pertinent organization, Coveware. Coveware is an organization where what their job is they understand ransomware gangs. They understand their business model. They understand how they interact. And what they do is if your backups are corrupted, if your data has been taken out and you have no way to recover, you're going to engage with Coveware, and their job is to negotiate your ransomware payments. And based on this, I mean, what we're seeing is from an economic impact, the ability for you to get away with paying a small amount is increasing, right? It's tripled in the last 12 months. The other part is look at the breach values. You're paying $233,000, right? On top of that, you're down for 19 days. Then you have the total business impact of $760,000. Not many organizations can survive that. And the ones that do that, well, you may survive this, but then there's the damage to reputation. There's the slow comeback. I mean, it's no longer just some small, a little blip on the radar. This threat is really could be an economic business ending event. So, I mean, this is part and parcel of why we like to have these talks, just to educate people, let them understand. And the other part we've talked about is kind of breaches, right? Because when you have a breach, it's usually based on today's threat landscape, and not just malware ran, right? It actually involves a human actor. So if we look at this, right, we look at 45% of breaches featured hacking. That hacking versus malware is this. Malware is bad software, bad code, malware. But a hacker is a bad person, an attacker, right, that actually targeted you. So the reality is human-led attacks require human-led defense, right? And this, for example, some of the things, brute force or stolen creds, right? Exploit vulnerability, using something used every day to get into your network, a backdoor, prime example, again, another device come in through another way, or abuse of functionality. So these are all things that involve a human attacker. So this is why a main key reason Steve wanted me to come and conversate with you about this, because that baseline of just using known good tools is not enough. Those tools, even though they're automated, they also have intelligence amongst them. You need to add human intel on top. Now, from our perspective, what makes Sophos different than other providers is, we believe security is a system. You can't just have point solutions layered together and not communicating together, because that's not enough. And we as an organization are very well propelled to augment our automated tools with individual security analysts in that security operations center, because we have a Gartner leading endpoint, we have a Gartner leading firewall, and we have all these other solutions in between that all communicate together through something called synchronized security. And what this means is having a Gartner leading endpoint, having a Gartner leading firewall that have automated security, but also communication between them to do automated protection, right? So what this really means is when we look at MTR, the need for MTR, this is augmenting all those tools with those people. And I mean, understanding this problem is when we traditionally looked at it from day one, not 10 years ago, but 3-5 years ago, you had the problem is here's bad code, here's good code. And if you had an automated security tool that had seen something before it could convict it, you'd be able to lock it. But if you couldn't, you had this massive gap, right? And one of the first things Steve and his team did is they realized traditional tools weren't enough. They had to move forward. And what they did is they partnered with Sophos. This is where our partnership came into play, and this is where we grew that partnership. They partnered with Sophos to start running Sophos Intercept X within your environment. And this is the industry's best protection, right? It stops more threats. It results in a much smaller gap. It has the ability to understand and protect against the methods an attack would use to use a vulnerability. It has machine learning to better protect you against unseen malware, unseen attacks. It also has behavior-based ransomware protection to stop you from ransomware, but those are all automated defenses, right? So while tools are making it easy to mine the gap, they can't close that gap by themselves. So what do we do, right? How do we make sure that we can catch it when the attacker gets in versus catching on a breach or a detection event only with automated tools? That is where we bring in people, right? We need to bring in 24/7 security monitoring response services. And the thing is, you need those people to bridge that gap. You need the brightest minds that understand the security landscape, understand how to detect, hunt, and defend, because with Sophos MTR, it's not like other vendors where it's just managed threat detection. It's managed threat response, where our analysts will kill, clean, and remediate the attack and let you know that it's been cleaned, right? And some of the things outside of the deeper technical pieces is when you onboard with MTR, we're going to do one thing is we're going to do something called adversarial detections. We're going to look and make sure, are you clean? Is your environment safe and clean? Is there no attacker in? We're also going to do a security health check, providing a report. This is where we see you from a security perspective. Here's the things or the actions you need to take. The other side of it is we're going to give you direct call-in support. If you see something suspicious, you think you see something, or maybe you hear something, we're seeing this in the environment or in the news, we want to know, are we protected? You have direct call-in support. Beyond that, I mean, as you're part and parcel using the service, we have scheduled ops reviews where you with the Imperium team could schedule an ops review to talk to our threat teams, right? But more importantly, we have the authorized piece. This means we're going to remediate and clean. And I know we're coming up on time. Just one more quick slide to kind of reiterate this, right? This brings that 200 days, that 3 weeks attackers in your environment. Average time to detect is 2 minutes. This is not the payload. This is if somebody's taken ownership and gotten your environment. Once they're in, average time to response is 20 minutes, right? Then the average time to resolve is 60 minutes. So now what happens is you're not having that breach event, not having to leverage cybersecurity insurance and incur all these other costs. What you're doing is you have that team monitoring you, and within 2 minutes on average of something seen suspicious, they're identified it, they're taking action. Within an hour on average, they've made sure you're clean, the attacker's been kicked out and you're whole, right? And this is the key reason, based on what the threat landscape looks like and the change in that threat landscape, is why Steve has seen the value in bringing this within his organization and also partnering with us to bring it to your organizations. So I know I know my wife always says I like to talk a lot, so I apologize, but I'm going to pass it back to Steve. I know I've gone over by about 4 minutes here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rippy. It's like drinking a little bit from a fire hose, I guess. But I thank you for highlighting the threat landscape there. It's very critical that we take this information seriously. I think if you get nothing more out of this than understanding that there is still risk, what we're going to be doing is adding MTR to our stack. We'll be engaging with each of you that is on the webinar on a conversation in the week to come here to discuss this a little bit further. And basically what we're suggesting here is that we deploy this to your organization, make sure you have 24/7 security monitoring in place to catch these threats as they evolve versus after the fact. So I know we had offered the opportunity for some questions. Want to respect everybody's time here today, so we'll let you go. If you have questions, please reach out to myself, sales@empyrean.net, or to Taylor, T. McGuire at Empyrean.net. We'll do our best to publish those questions for everybody. We'll make sure that the slide deck is available, and then we'll recording of this presentation as well. So thank you very much. We will do a prize draw offline here as we shut this down, and we'll include that information in the email we send out as well. So thank you very much, Rippy. Sophos. Thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to listen. And again, I know it's a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. You have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll do our best to get answers to whatever questions, concerns you might have. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.